Enjoy the 1 hour-long bedtime and sleep story to fall asleep quickly. Subscribe if you like the video and support me with a like. It was a night like no other, cloaked in a kind of storm that rattles windows and bends trees into bowing submission. Rain cascaded down like a veil, turning the streets into rivers that glistened under flickering streetlights. For Alara, the storm was a perfect backdrop to her favorite activity, reading. A book tucked under her arm, she hurried through the narrow streets of her quiet town, eager to return home to her tiny apartment, where a steaming cup of tea and a warm blanket awaited her. But as she turned the corner into an alley she'd walked countless times before, something peculiar caught her eye. A shop she had never seen before stood at the alley's end. Its wooden sign swayed gently in the stormy breeze, its paint faded and worn. The letters spelled out, "The Whispering Bookshop." Alara stopped in her tracks, frowning. She knew every shop in the area, and this one had never been there before. Not yesterday, not last week, not in the years she'd lived here. She tilted her umbrella, squinting through the rain. The shop's windows glowed faintly, the kind of golden light that felt impossibly inviting on such a bleak night. Curiosity got the better of her. Tightening her coat around herself, she walked toward the shop. The door creaked as Alara pushed it open, and a warm wave of air enveloped her. The scent of aged paper and leather bindings filled her nose, a comforting aroma that only true bibliophiles could appreciate. She stepped inside, shaking off the rain. The bookshop was small, but it seemed to go on forever. Books lined every wall, piled in teetering stacks on tables, and tucked into nooks she wouldn't have thought possible. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting flickering light across the room. At the counter stood an old man with silver hair and round spectacles perched on the edge of his nose. He looked up from a book he was reading and smiled, his face creasing with warmth. "A visitor," he said, his voice smooth and rich, like a story being told. "Welcome to the Whispering Bookshop. You must have a keen eye to have found it. I walked this way 100 times and never seen this place," Alara said, glancing around. "Is it new?" The old man chuckled. "No, not new. Just selective." His cryptic answer made Alara smile nervously. Something about this place felt odd, almost dreamlike, but her love for books outweighed her hesitation. Alara wandered through the shop, her fingers brushing the spines of the books. Some were covered in ornate designs, others plain and unassuming. She noticed that none of them had titles. "Why don't these books have titles?" she asked, looking over her shoulder at the shopkeeper. These books are special," he replied. "They don't reveal their contents to just anyone. Only those who listen carefully can hear their whispers." "Whispers?" The shopkeeper nodded. "Lean close, child. You'll see." Hesitant but intrigued, Alara picked up a small leather-bound book and held it close to her ear. At first, she heard nothing, but then a faint murmur. The sound grew clearer, like a distant voice carried on the wind. The voice wasn't speaking words exactly, but she felt as though she understood it anyway. Images of far-off places flickered in her mind, towering mountains shrouded in mist, oceans that sparkled with silver light, and cities filled with people who looked unlike anyone she'd ever seen. Alara gasped, pulling the book away. "How is that possible? Stories have lives of their own," the old man said, his smile widening. "And these stories are very much alive." Alara spent hours browsing the shop, losing herself in the peculiar books. Each time she pressed one to her ear, she caught glimpses of another world, another life. But one book, tucked away on a dusty shelf in the corner, drew her in more than the others. Its cover was unlike anything she'd seen before, black leather that shimmered faintly as if catching starlight. She picked it up, and the air around her seemed to shift. Holding it close, she expected to hear the whispers like before, but instead, the book was silent. "It's quiet," she said, confused. The shopkeeper's expression turned thoughtful. "That one doesn't speak to everyone. It's particular." Alara looked at the shopkeeper, then back at the book. "May I buy it?" The old man's eyes twinkled with something she couldn't quite place. "Consider it a gift," he said, handing it to her with both hands. "But be warned, it's not just a book. It's an invitation." "An invitation to what?" "To adventure," he replied simply. Back in her apartment, Alara couldn't stop thinking about the shop. Who was that shopkeeper? And how had she never seen the shop before? She placed the black book on her desk, its mysterious cover gleaming faintly in the dim light. With a cup of tea in hand, she sat down, opened the book, and found that its pages were blank. Disappointed, she flipped through, but every page was the same, empty save for faint impressions, as if words had once been written there but had long since faded. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, closing the book with a huff. But as soon as she did, the room seemed to darken. The pages of the book began to glow faintly, and a low hum filled the air. The book flipped open on its own, the glowing light intensifying. Alara's heart raced. She leaned in closer, and suddenly, the symbols on the page rearranged themselves into a swirling pattern. Without thinking, she traced the pattern with her finger. The moment she did, a powerful force pulled her forward. She felt weightless, as if she were being drawn into the very fabric of the book. Light surrounded her, growing brighter and brighter until everything else disappeared. When the light faded, Alara found herself standing in a place that defied explanation. She was in a library, if it could even be called that. The space stretched infinitely in every direction, shelves upon shelves of books towering higher than skyscrapers. The air was thick with the smell of parchment, and a faint hum vibrated through the space. Books floated gently through the air, some opening and closing as if they were alive. Strange creatures flitted between the shelves, their forms shimmering like mirages. "What is this place?" Alara whispered. A voice behind her answered, deep and resonant. "You have entered the library between worlds." Alara turned to see a tall figure, cloaked in robes made of shifting pages. Its eyes glowed faintly, and its presence radiated an ancient power. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am the Keeper of Tales," the figure said, inclining its head. "And you, dear traveler, have just taken your first step into a much larger story." Alara's heart thudded in her chest as she stood before the Keeper of Tales. The immense figure loomed over her, its robe-like form rippling softly, as if made of pages caught in an unseen wind. "Why am I here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is this place?" The Keeper's glowing eyes softened, and it gestured to the endless rows of shelves and floating books around them. "You are here because you heard the call. The library between worlds exists as a nexus, a meeting point of countless realities. Every book here contains a world, and every world is a story waiting to be lived." Alara's gaze swept across the expanse of the library. The shelves stretched so high into the sky that the top was lost in shadow. Some books glowed faintly, others pulsed with energy, and a few were shrouded in darkness. "Worlds inside books," she repeated, incredulous. "Indeed," the Keeper replied, "and some of those worlds are in need of a guide, a storyteller who can weave together the threads of fate. That is why you were chosen." "Chosen?" Alara's voice rose with disbelief. I didn't choose anything. I was just reading a book in my apartment. That book was no ordinary text. The keeper interrupted gently. It was a portal, a key to this place. Only those with a deep connection to stories can find it, let alone activate it. As Alara tried to process the keeper's words, a soft hum began to fill the air. She realized it wasn't coming from the keeper, but from the library itself. The walls and shelves seemed alive, vibrating with an energy she couldn't name. "Do you hear that?" she asked, glancing around. "The library speaks," the keeper said. "It feels the presence of a new traveler and seeks to guide you." Alara frowned. "Guide me where? I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to read a book and stay out of the rain." The keeper let out a sound that might have been a laugh, low and reverberating. Many great journeys begin in unexpected ways. You stand at a crossroads, Alara. You may choose to leave, return to your life, as if this never happened, or you may choose to stay and fulfill the role the library has offered you. Alara hesitated, glancing down at her hands. She thought of her quiet, predictable life, her apartment filled with books, her days spent at the office, her evenings lost in stories. The idea of leaving this surreal place felt wrong, as if some part of her already belonged here. "What happens if I stay?" she asked. The keeper's glowing eyes brightened. "You will become a traveler, a guardian of stories, tasked with entering the worlds within these books. Some worlds are thriving, others are fractured, and a few are in grave danger. Your role would be to restore balance, to ensure their tales can continue." Before Alara could respond, the hum around her grew louder, almost insistent. The shelf nearby began to shake, and one of its books floated out, hovering in midair before her. The book was larger than the one she'd found in the Whispering Bookshop, its cover shimmering like liquid gold. Symbols danced across its surface, rearranging themselves into a title she could barely decipher: The Shattered Isles. "What's happening?" she asked, backing away from the floating book. "The library has chosen your first story," the keeper said. "The Shattered Isles is a fragile world, on the brink of collapse. Its tale has unraveled, its balance broken. If left unchecked, it will cease to exist." Alara stared at the book, her pulse quickening. The symbols on its cover seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, drawing her in. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. "I don't even know how to fix a story," she whispered. "You do not need to know," the keeper replied. "The story will guide you. All you must do is enter." The golden book flipped open, its pages glowing with a warm, inviting light. As Alara leaned closer, she saw shapes forming on the pages: mountains, oceans, islands floating in the sky. The images moved, alive, as if the book were a window into another world. Her hand reached out before she could stop herself. The moment her fingers touched the page, she felt a tug, like an invisible force pulling her forward. "Alara," the keeper said, its voice echoing in her mind, "once you cross the threshold, there is no turning back until the story is complete. Do you accept this journey?" Alara hesitated, her heart pounding, but deep down she knew her answer. The idea of leaving now, of returning to her ordinary life, felt impossible. "I accept," she said. The keeper nodded, then stepped forward, "Traveler, the story awaits." The pull intensified, and before Alara could change her mind, she was yanked into the book. Alara landed with a jolt, the sensation of solid ground beneath her feet replacing the strange weightlessness of the library. She looked around, her breath catching in her throat. She was standing on a rocky shoreline, waves crashing against jagged cliffs. Above her, the sky was an eerie mix of colors, violet and gold, streaked with silver clouds. In the distance, she could see islands floating in mid-air, connected by shimmering bridges of light. But the beauty of the scene was marred by a sense of unease. The air felt heavy, charged with tension. The floating islands trembled, their edges crumbling into the sky like sand swept away by an invisible wind. "What is this place?" Ilara whispered. "This is the Shattered Isles," a new voice answered. She turned to see a figure standing nearby. It was a man, tall and lean, with sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly like the keeper's. He wore a cloak made of feathers that shimmered in the strange light. "Who are you?" Ilara asked, her voice wary. "I am Kale, a guide of this world," the man said. "The Isles are on the verge of collapse, their story fraying at the seams. If we don't act quickly, everything here will be lost." Ilara swallowed hard. "And what am I supposed to do?" Kale's gaze softened. "You are the traveler, the one who can mend the threads of this tale. But first, we must find the source of the fracture." With no time to waste, Kale led Ilara toward a nearby village perched precariously on the edge of a crumbling cliff. As they walked, he explained that the Isle's story had been disrupted by an ancient conflict, a war between the Skyborn and the Earthbound, two factions that had once lived in harmony but now sought to destroy each other. "Their division has torn the very fabric of this world," Kale said. "To mend it, you must uncover the truth behind their feud and help them remember their shared story." Ilara nodded, though her mind swirled with doubt. She was just an ordinary woman, a reader, not a hero. How could she possibly fix an entire world? But as the village came into view, its people gathered in the square with fear and desperation etched on their faces, Ilara realized there was no turning back. Her journey in the Shattered Isles had begun. The village at the edge of the cliff was unlike anything Ilara had ever seen. The houses were carved directly into the stone, their walls covered with intricate carvings that shimmered faintly, glowing brighter when touched by the strange golden light of the fractured sky. The villagers moved about in quiet unease, their gazes flickering to the floating islands above, as if they expected them to collapse at any moment. Kale guided Ilara through the winding pathways of the village until they reached the central square, where a crowd had gathered. At its center stood an elderly woman, her gnarled hands gripping a staff adorned with feathers and stones. She exuded an air of authority, and her piercing eyes locked onto Ilara the moment she stepped into view. "This is her," the woman asked Kale, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "Yes," Kale replied. "She is the traveler." The woman studied Ilara for a long moment before nodding. "Then there is hope. Come, child. There is much you need to see." The woman introduced herself as Elder Lasara, the leader of the Earthbound in this part of the Isles. She explained that the Earthbound and the Skyborn had once lived in harmony, their worlds connected by the luminous bridges that now flickered and faded. The Skyborn lived on the floating islands above, while the Earthbound dwelled on the cliffs and plains below. The Skyborn were the keepers of the skies, Lasara said as she led Ilara and Kale into a cavern beneath the village. The walls were lined with glowing crystals, casting a soft light over ancient murals. And we, the Earthbound, were the stewards of the land. Together, we kept the balance of this world. Ilara studied the murals, which depicted scenes of unity, Skyborn and Earthbound working together to build the bridges, sharing resources and celebrating under the same sky. But as they moved deeper into the cavern, the murals darkened. The scenes shifted to show conflict. Skyborn soldiers with wings of fire clashing against Earthbound warriors wielding stone and root. The bridges were shown breaking, the land below crumbling into the void. What caused the rift? Alara asked, her voice echoing in the cavern. No one knows for certain, Lasara admitted. The stories have been lost, twisted by time and anger, but we believe it began with a betrayal. The Skyborn accuse us of stealing their sacred artifact, the Heart of Ether, which they claim binds this world together. But we never took it, and without the heart, Kale added, the balance of the Isles began to unravel. Alara frowned. So if the Heart of Ether is returned, the world can be restored? Perhaps, Lasara said. But no Earthbound has set foot on the floating islands in generations. The Skyborn guard their territory fiercely, believing themselves superior to us. Before Alara could ask more, the cavern trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a faint hum filled the air, a sound eerily similar to the one she'd heard in the library. Lasara stiffened, her eyes narrowing. They're here, she said grimly. Who's here? Alara asked, but her question was answered before Lasara could respond. A figure stepped into the cavern, their presence commanding and otherworldly. The newcomer was a Skyborn, unmistakably so. Their silver hair shimmered like moonlight, and their eyes glowed faintly with the same golden hue as the bridges. A pair of translucent wings, delicate yet powerful, folded neatly behind their back. They wore armor etched with runes that pulsed faintly with energy. Alara, Kale murmured, his tone wary. This is Neres, an ambassador of the Skyborn. Neres inclined their head toward Alara, their expression unreadable. So it's true. The traveler has arrived. Alara shifted uncomfortably under their piercing gaze. That's what they keep telling me, she said. But I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Neres' gaze softened slightly, and they stepped closer. The balance of our world is breaking apart. If you truly are the traveler, you must help us find the Heart of Ether and restore it to its rightful place. Do you know where it is? Alara asked. Neres hesitated. We believe it is hidden somewhere in the Sky Citadel, the central island of our realm. But the path to the Citadel is treacherous, and the bridges leading there are unstable. The tension between Lasara and Neres was palpable as they stood on either side of Alara, each representing their fractured people. The two exchanged sharp words, each blaming the other for the chaos that had befallen their world. Enough, Alara said, her voice cutting through the argument. Both leaders turned to her, startled. Don't you see, she continued, your fighting is only making things worse. If we're going to save this world, we need to work together. Lasara and Neres exchanged wary glances but said nothing. Kale stepped forward. The traveler is right. The Heart of Ether may be in the Sky Citadel, but reaching it will require cooperation. The bridges won't hold if the balance remains broken. After a long silence, Neres nodded. Very well. I will take the traveler to the Skyborn territories. But know this, if the heart is not found, the blame will not fall on my people. And if it is found in your possession, Lasara said sharply, you will answer for it. With the fragile alliance formed, Neres led Alara and Kale to the edge of the village, where a shimmering bridge of light arched upward toward the nearest floating island. The bridge flickered dangerously, its edges fraying like threads unraveling from a tapestry. Step carefully, Neres warned. The bridges are not as stable as they once were. Alara took a deep breath and followed Neres onto the bridge, her heart pounding with each step. The air grew thinner as they climbed, and the ground below became a distant blur. As they neared the floating island, Alara's eyes widened. The island was a marvel of engineering and magic, its buildings crafted from gleaming stone and adorned with intricate carvings that glowed faintly. But even here, the signs of decay were evident. Cracks ran through the structures, and chunks of the island's edges crumbled into the void. "This is only the beginning," Nerys said as they stepped onto the island. "The sky's citadel lies beyond, at the heart of the Isles. But reaching it will not be easy. There are forces at work here that seek to keep the heart hidden, and they will not welcome your presence." Elara nodded, determination hardening her resolve. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she couldn't turn back now. The fate of this world depended on her. The floating island where Elara, Kale, and Nerys landed was a crossroads, its crumbling pathways leading to other suspended landmasses. The air shimmered faintly with energy, but the beauty of the skyward world was overshadowed by an unsettling stillness. "This place feels wrong," Elara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has been this way for decades," Nerys replied, their tone somber. "The balance has tipped too far. The life that once thrived here has been drained away, leaving only echoes." The faint hum of magic filled the air as Nerys led the way across another fragile bridge. Elara followed carefully, her eyes scanning the floating world around her. Below them, the endless void seemed to ripple and shift, as though something ancient and unseen stirred in its depths. Their destination loomed ahead, a towering spire of white stone, its peak lost in the swirling golden light above. This was the Sky Citadel, the heart of the Skyborn's domain and the supposed resting place of the Heart of Ether. But as they approached the Citadel, Nerys held up a hand to stop them. "Before we can enter, we must pass through the trials," Nerys said, their expression grave. "Trials?" Kale asked, his brow furrowing. Nerys nodded. "The Citadel is protected by ancient guardians, remnants of the magic that once bound our worlds together. They will test us to determine whether we are worthy to proceed, and their judgment is absolute." Elara's stomach twisted with nerves, but she forced herself to nod. "What kind of tests are we talking about?" "No one knows," Nerys admitted. "The trials are said to adapt to the challengers, drawing on their deepest fears and doubts. But if we fail," their voice trailed off, and the meaning was clear. The entrance to the Citadel was a massive archway etched with glowing runes. As the group stepped closer, the runes flared to life, and the air shimmered like a pool of water. "Only those who seek truth may enter," a voice echoed, deep and resonant. Elara glanced at Nerys, who gave her a small nod. Steeling herself, she stepped through the archway. On the other side, Elara found herself alone in a circular chamber of mirrors. Her reflection stared back at her from every direction, each image slightly distorted. As she moved, the reflections began to shift, showing moments from her past, some familiar, others forgotten. In one mirror, she saw herself as a child, curled up with a book in a dusty library. In another, she saw the moment she had discovered the portal, her face alight with wonder and fear. But then the images darkened. She saw herself standing in the void, the bridges around her crumbling into nothingness. She saw Kale and Nerys disappearing into the darkness, their voices calling out to her in anguish. "This is your truth," a voice whispered. "You are an outsider, unbound by the laws of this world. But your presence here has set events into motion that cannot be undone. Will you continue, knowing the weight of what lies ahead?" Elara swallowed hard. "I didn't come this far to turn back now," she said firmly. "If there's a chance I can help, I have to try." The mirrors shimmered, and the distorted reflections resolved into a single clear image of herself. The archway reappeared, and she stepped through to find Kale and Neres waiting. The next trial was a labyrinth, its walls formed of shifting stone and shadow. The group moved cautiously, the air heavy with an oppressive silence. As they navigated the maze, the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting into shapes that clawed and whispered at the edges of their vision. At first, Alara thought it was just a trick of the light, but then one of the shadows lunged at her, its form solidifying into a creature with glowing red eyes. Kale reacted instantly, drawing his dagger and slashing at the shadowy figure. The creature dissipated into mist, but more began to emerge, their hissing voices filling the air. "We have to keep moving," Neres shouted, their wings unfurling as they sent a blast of light at the advancing shadows. Alara ran, heart pounding as the maze twisted and shifted around them. The shadows seemed to anticipate their every move, forcing them into dead ends and splitting the group apart. "Stay together," Kale called, but his voice grew fainter as the walls closed in. Alara found herself alone again, the shadows closing in around her. She remembered the crystal shard she had taken from the library and pulled it from her pocket. The shard glowed faintly in her hand, its light pushing back the darkness. As she held it aloft, the maze seemed to react. The walls shifted, creating a path that led her back to Kale and Neres. The shadows recoiled from the shard's light, and the group pushed forward, finally emerging from the labyrinth. The final trial was a vast chamber at the top of the citadel, open to the sky above. The wind howled around them, carrying whispers that spoke of loss and longing. At the center of the chamber was a pedestal, its surface inscribed with the same runes that adorned the archway. Hovering above it was a fragment of glowing crystal, its light pulsing in rhythm with the hum of the winds. "This is only a piece of the heart," Neres said, their voice filled with awe, "but it is a start." As Alara stepped forward to claim the fragment, the winds intensified, and a figure emerged from the swirling air. It was a guardian, its form shimmering like glass and light. "To take the heart is to take responsibility for this world's fate," the guardian intoned. "Do you accept this burden?" Alara hesitated, the weight of the question pressing down on her. She glanced at Kale and Neres, who both nodded in silent support. "Yes," she said, "I accept." The guardian bowed its head, and the fragment of the heart floated into Alara's hands. Its warmth spread through her, filling her with a sense of purpose and connection. As the winds died down, a new path appeared, leading deeper into the citadel. The journey was far from over, but Alara knew they were one step closer to restoring the balance of the Isles. The path leading deeper into the citadel was illuminated by the faint glow of the heart fragment in Alara's hands. Each step seemed to resonate with the stone beneath their feet, as though the citadel itself acknowledged their presence. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the trials lifting, but a sense of unease lingered in Alara's chest. "We have the fragment," Alara said, glancing at Neres. "But it's just one piece. Where do we go from here?" Neres studied the glowing fragment, their expression thoughtful. The heart of ether was shattered into 5 pieces when the balance was lost. Each fragment carries a part of the world's essence: light, time, life, memory, and unity. This one represents light. If we are to restore the heart, we must gather the others. "Do you know where they are?" Kale asked. "Not exactly," Neres admitted. "But the fragment will guide us. It's connected to the others, like threads of a web stretching across the realms." Alara held the fragment closer, its light flickering faintly in response. "Then we follow it." The path led them to a grand chamber at the heart of the citadel. Towering shelves lined the walls, filled with scrolls and tomes that seemed untouched by time. At the center of the room stood a pedestal similar to the one that had held the fragment, but this one bore a swirling pool of golden light. "This is an archive of the Skyborn," Neres explained, their voice filled with reverence. "It holds knowledge of the realms, their creation, and their fall. Perhaps it can show us where the other fragments are hidden." As Alara approached the pedestal, the pool of light reacted to her presence, its surface rippling like water. Images began to form within the light. A vast desert under a crimson sky, a forest of silver trees, a cavern filled with cascading waterfalls of light, and a mountain peak that pierced the heavens. "These are the resting places of the fragments," Neres said, their gaze fixed on the images. "Each one is tied to the essence it represents." "Which one do we go to first?" Kale asked. Before Neres could answer, the light shifted, showing a final image, a dark and fractured realm, its skies stormy and its ground littered with jagged crystals. The vision filled Alara with a sense of dread. "That's where the last fragment lies," Neres said quietly. "The essence of unity. But we cannot go there until we've gathered the others. That place is unstable." Alara nodded, her determination hardening. "Then we start with the desert." Before they could leave, the light in the archive dimmed, and a figure materialized within it. It was a projection of a Skyborn, their translucent form glowing faintly. "You who seek to restore the heart," the figure said, their voice echoing with ancient power. "Beware the shadows that move unseen." The fracturing of the heart was no accident, but an act of betrayal. The balance was disrupted by one who sought power above all else. Alara's heart raced as the figure continued. "This force still lingers, hidden in the cracks between worlds. It will seek to stop you, for the restoration of the heart threatens its existence." "Who is it?" Alara asked, her voice trembling. The figure shook their head. "Its true nature is obscured, even to us. But know this, it can take many forms, weaving lies to sow discord and doubt. Trust your companions, but guard your heart." The projection faded, leaving the group in stunned silence. As they exited the archive, the citadel began to shift around them. Staircases unfurled like ribbons, and bridges extended into the void, creating a path that led toward the outer edge of the floating islands. The fragment in Alara's hand glowed brighter, pulling her toward the new path. "It's guiding us," she said, her voice filled with wonder. But as they moved forward, the air grew colder, and the shimmering light of the floating world seemed to dim. Shadows began to creep along the edges of the islands, their movements slow but deliberate. "They're watching us," Kale muttered, his hand on the hilt of his dagger. "Let them watch," Neres said, their wings unfurling slightly. "They won't dare attack here. The Citadel's magic is too strong." Alara wasn't so sure. The memory of the labyrinth shadows lingered in her mind, and the warning from the archive echoed in her ears. As they reached the edge of the floating islands, a new portal materialized, a swirling vortex of sand and light. It pulsed in rhythm with the fragment, its energy inviting yet foreboding. "This will take us to the desert realm," Neres said. "But once we step through, there's no turning back." Alara gripped the fragment tightly and stepped forward. "Then let's go." The portal enveloped them in a whirlwind of golden light, and for a moment, Alara felt weightless. When the light faded, they found themselves standing on the edge of a vast desert. The sky above was a deep crimson, and the sand beneath their feet sparkled like crushed gemstones. The air was heavy with magic, and the horizon seemed to shimmer with heat and mirages. But the fragment in Alara's hand glowed brighter than ever, pointing the way forward. "The fragment of life lies somewhere in this realm," Neres said. But the desert is treacherous. Its sands can shift without warning, and its magic plays tricks on the mind. Alara took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Then we'll face it together. As they set off into the shimmering expanse, the shadows lurking at the edges of their vision seemed to grow bolder, their movements quicker and more deliberate. The journey was far from over, and the true trials were only beginning. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a shimmering expanse of ruby-red sand that seemed to ripple like the surface of a vast, sunlit ocean. The crimson sky above was devoid of clouds, its hue deepening as though the realm itself pulsed with life. A soft, otherworldly hum filled the air, reverberating in their chests like a heartbeat. Alara tightened her grip on the glowing fragment, its light casting faint, golden rays across the sands. Each step they took left ephemeral imprints in the ground, their tracks vanishing moments later as though the desert refused to remember. "Stay close," Neri said, their voice firm but laced with caution. "The magic here is alive. It feels us, watches us, watches us." Kale asked, scanning the horizon. His hand rested on the hilt of his dagger, ready to draw at the first sign of danger. "What does that mean?" "This realm is tied to the essence of life," Neres explained. "It responds to the energy of living beings. Every thought, every emotion, it's reflected in the desert. It can be both a guide and a trap." As they ventured further into the desert, the sands began to shift beneath their feet, forming gentle waves that rippled outward like a stone dropped into a pond. The air grew warmer, and the hum in the distance grew louder, almost melodic. Suddenly, the fragment in Alara's hand began to pulse with rhythmic intensity, its light brightening and dimming in sync with the sound. The sands ahead parted, revealing a narrow, winding path lined with crystalline formations that glimmered in hues of green and gold. "It's showing us the way," Alara said, her voice filled with awe. "Or leading us into a trap," Kale muttered. Neri stepped forward, their wings folding tightly against their back. "Either way, we must follow. The fragment's connection to the heart is stronger here. We're close." The group followed the path cautiously, their senses heightened. The crystalline formations grew larger as they advanced, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed. Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the patterns were trying to convey something, though their meaning eluded her. As the path led them deeper into the desert, the air shimmered with heat and light, creating mirages that danced on the horizon. At first, they seemed harmless, images of distant oases, towering spires, and flowing rivers. But as they continued, the mirages began to change. Alara stopped abruptly, her breath catching in her throat. Before her stood an image of her mother, her eyes warm and her arms outstretched in an embrace. "Alara," the figure said softly, her voice filled with love. "Come to me." "Alara, don't." Neris called, their voice sharp and urgent. But the vision was so vivid, so real, that Alara found herself stepping forward without thinking. The fragment in her hand pulsed erratically, its light flickering like a warning. Alara stopped. Kale's voice cut through the haze, and he grabbed her arm, pulling her back. The mirage shattered like glass, the shards dissolving into the air. In its place, the sand churned violently, forming a gaping maw that snapped shut before sinking back into the ground. "Thank you," Alara whispered, her voice trembling. "This desert feeds on memories," Neri said grimly. "It will use them against you. Trust only what is real." Hours seemed to pass as they trudged onward, their bodies growing weary under the oppressive heat. Just as hope began to wane, the fragment's light intensified, revealing a lush oasis in the distance. The sight was almost too perfect. Tall golden trees with shimmering leaves, a crystal clear lake reflecting the crimson sky, and vibrant flowers blooming in every color imaginable. "This must be it," Neri said, their voice tinged with relief. "The fragment of life is here." But as they approached, the ground beneath them trembled, and the air grew heavy with magic. From the center of the oasis rose a towering figure, its form composed entirely of golden light. It resembled a great serpent, its eyes glowing with an ancient intelligence. "Who dares enter the oasis of life?" The serpent's voice boomed, echoing across the desert. Alara stepped forward, holding up the fragment. "We seek the heart of ether. We mean no harm." The serpent's eyes narrowed. "To take the fragment, you must prove your worth. Life is not given freely. It must be earned." The serpent coiled around a lake, its body shimmering like liquid gold. "The trial is simple," it said. "Show me the strength of your bond, the unity of your purpose. Only those who walk the path of life together may claim the fragment." The serpent raised its head, and the oasis transformed. The lake disappeared, replaced by a sprawling maze of golden trees. The air filled with the rustling of leaves and the distant sound of footsteps, though no one else could be seen. "The maze will test your resolve," the serpent said. "Lose sight of one another, and you will be lost forever." Alara, Neres, and Kale exchanged determined looks. "We won't fail," Alara said firmly. "Then begin," the serpent intoned, its voice fading as the maze closed around them. The group moved carefully through the labyrinth, the glowing fragments serving as their guide. The paths twisted and turned unpredictably, and the golden trees seemed to shift when they weren't looking, creating new obstacles. At one point, Alara found herself separated from the others. Panic surged through her, but she remembered the serpent's words, "Trust your bond." "Alara!" Kale's voice echoed from somewhere nearby. "Follow the light." Neres called. Holding the fragment aloft, Alara focused on its glow. It pulsed steadily, guiding her back toward her companions. When they reunited, the relief was palpable. "We're stronger together," Neres said, their voice steady. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the center of the maze. There, resting on a pedestal of golden roots, was the fragment of life. It glowed with a warm, verdant light, filling the air with the scent of fresh blooms. Alara approached cautiously, the fragment in her hand resonating with the one on the pedestal. When she reached out to touch it, the two fragments merged, their light becoming one. The serpent reappeared, its gaze approving. "You have proven yourselves. The essence of life is now yours to carry. But beware, the further you go, the greater the challenges will become." With the fragment secured, the oasis dissolved, leaving them once again in the vast desert. Alara and Neres said, their tone both hopeful and wary, 2 fragments down. 3 to go. Alara nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "Let's keep moving." The transition from the ruby desert to the forest was almost imperceptible. At first, Alara thought it was a mirage, patches of green appearing on the horizon where there had been none before. But with every step, the air grew cooler, the light dimmer, and the sand beneath their feet gave way to soft moss and winding roots. The forest rose before them like a living tapestry, its towering trees stretching endlessly upward, their branches intertwining to form a dense canopy. The light that filtered through was faint and silvery, casting everything in an ethereal glow. Strange, luminescent flowers bloomed along the forest floor, their petals releasing faint whispers when disturbed. "This place feels alive," Kale said, his voice low as though not to disturb the silence. "It is," Mary's replied, their tone reverent. "The forest of memory. Every leaf, every tree, every flower is a fragment of someone's past. Memories are stored here, woven into the fabric of the forest itself." Elara shivered. "So we're walking through other people's lives?" "In a sense," Nerys said. "But be wary. Memories can be as treacherous as they are beautiful. If you linger too long, you might lose yourself in them." The glowing fragment in Alara's hand grew brighter as they ventured deeper into the forest, casting long shadows on the ground. The path before them was not fixed, but seemed to shift and twist with every step, the trees rearranging themselves as though guiding or testing them. As they walked, fragments of memories began to manifest around them. At first, they were faint, a child's laughter, the sound of a bell, the scent of freshly baked bread. But soon the visions grew clear. They passed the scene of an elderly couple sitting beneath a tree, their hands clasped tightly as they watched the sunset. A group of children ran by, their laughter echoing through the trees. And then a young woman stood alone, tears streaming down her face as she released a lantern into the sky. "These are echoes," Nerys explained. "Moments that held great meaning, preserved here for eternity." Alara's gaze lingered on a young woman, her heart aching with an inexplicable sadness. "Why do I feel like I know her?" "The forest has a way of connecting us to memories that resonate with our own," Nerys said. "It's trying to reach you." The forest seemed to grow denser, the air thick with the weight of countless memories. As they moved forward, Alara felt a strange pull, like invisible threads tugging at her very being. Suddenly, the world around her shifted, and she found herself standing in a small, sunlit garden. The scent of lilacs filled the air, and the sound of a soft melody drifted from a nearby window. "Alara," a familiar voice called. She turned and saw her mother, her face radiant with warmth and love. Her heart skipped a beat. "Mother!" Her mother smiled, holding out her hand. "Kadir, it's time to go inside." Alara's mind raced. She knew this was a memory her mother had passed years ago, and yet everything about the scene felt so real. "Alara!" Kale's voice broke through the haze, distant but urgent. "Don't lose yourself." The memory began to blur, the edges fraying like a tapestry coming undone. Alara clutched the glowing fragment in her hand, its light pulsing as though reminding her of her purpose. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping back. "I can't stay." Her mother's smile wavered, and the memory dissolved into a cascade of light. When Alara rejoined the group, her face was pale, and her hands trembled. Nerys placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The forest shows us what we hold most dear," they said gently. "But you were strong enough to let go." They continued onward, the path growing narrower as the trees seemed to press closer together. The whispers grew louder, forming a symphony of voices that rose and fell like the tide. "What are they saying?" Kale asked, his eyes scanning the shifting shadows. "They're fragments of thoughts, feelings, moments," Nerys replied. "But if you listen too closely, they can consume you." The trees parted suddenly, revealing a glade bathed in silvery light. At its center stood a massive willow tree, its branches cascading like a waterfall. Nestled within its roots was a glowing fragment, its light pulsating like a heartbeat. As they approached the willow, the air grew still, and a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a woman, her form translucent and shimmering like a mirage. Her eyes were deep pools of silver, reflecting countless images that shifted and changed. "I am the keeper of memories," she said, her voice soft but commanding. To claim the fragment, you must face the memories you fear the most. Are you prepared? Alara stepped forward, her resolve firm. We are. The keeper nodded and extended her hand. A wave of light swept over them, and the world around them dissolved. Alara found herself alone in a dark void, the silence oppressive. Then, one by one, memories began to emerge, moments she had buried deep within her heart. She saw herself as a child, standing in the rain, clutching a broken toy as her parents argued in the distance. She saw the day she left home, the weight of unspoken words heavy in her chest. She saw the moment she lost her mother, the crushing grief that threatened to consume her. You cannot hide from your pain, the keeper's voice echoed. Only by facing it can you move forward. Alara took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel the sorrow, the fear, the regret. But as she did, she also felt the love, the strength, the hope that had carried her through. When the memories faded, she stood taller, her heart lighter. The void dissolved, and Alara found herself back in the glade. The keeper smiled, her eyes filled with approval. You have faced your fears and emerged stronger. The fragment is yours. Alara reached out and took the fragment, its light merging with the others. A sense of warmth and peace filled her, as though the forest itself was blessing her journey. As the group prepared to leave, the keeper's voice echoed one final time. Remember, the past shapes us, but it does not define us. Carry that truth with you. Alara nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. 3 fragments down, 2 to go. The adventurer's footsteps echoed in the vast, oppressive silence of the cave. Each step sent a ripple of sound into the still air, but it was quickly swallowed by the endless darkness around them. The temperature had dropped, and a strange feeling of weight settled over their chest as if the cavern itself was alive, breathing softly, with the weight of centuries. At first, the whispers had been faint, like the flutter of leaves in a far-off wind. But as they ventured deeper, the voices grew louder, taking shape, each whisper curling into a distinct murmur. It wasn't just one voice speaking, but many, each telling its own fragmented tale. The adventurers strained to understand them, but the voices were too soft, too scattered to make sense of. Still, they pressed on, feeling an undeniable pull deeper into the cavern, as though someone was waiting for them. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the cave began to open up. The walls receded, revealing a vast, hollowed-out chamber that stretched upward into shadowy heights. The ceiling was so high it seemed to vanish into the gloom, and the floor was uneven, covered in ancient stone carvings and faded symbols. Yet the most striking feature was the soft, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from within the walls themselves. The light was not of this world, gentle, ghostly, and warm. It cast long, curved shadows that danced across the rocky floor. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, weathered and ancient. Upon it rested an object wrapped in cloth, a scroll, its edges tattered with age. The whispers grew stronger now, swirling around the adventurer in a soft but insistent chorus. The voices weren't just speaking anymore. They were pulling, guiding, urging the adventurer toward the pedestal. It was as if the very walls of the cave were alive, weaving a tapestry of memories and stories, each thread calling the adventurer to uncover the next chapter. The adventurer hesitated. There was a tension in the air, a quiet sense of urgency, as if the cave itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to act. With a deep breath, they stepped forward and reached for the scroll. As their fingers brushed the fabric, a jolt of energy surged through their arm, and a flood of memories, no, not their memories, rushed into their mind. The cave's whispers grew louder, clear. They weren't just fragments of forgotten stories. They were visions, vivid scenes of lives long past. The adventurers saw flashes of faces they had never met, places they had never been, and moments that had never touched their own life. It was a cascade of memories, and as they watched, the images began to shift, molding into something deeper, more personal. They saw a family, a mother, a father, and a child, laughing together in a sunlit garden. They saw a young woman standing on a cliff, watching the horizon, heart torn between two paths. They saw a man, older now, standing at crossroads in a desolate landscape, his hands shaking with the weight of a decision he had to make. And through each memory, through each fleeting moment, the adventurer felt an unexplainable sense of recognition. These were not just distant lives they were seeing. These were echoes of their own lives and choices they had long forgotten, or perhaps had never known. The cave was not just whispering about the past, it was unveiling their past, their hidden memories. But the more they saw, the more questions arose. How could these memories belong to them? Had they lived these lives? Had they made these choices? Or were these the reflections of a life they could have lived if they had chosen differently? The scroll now pulsed in their hands, glowing with a soft, internal light. Slowly, they unwrapped the fragile cloth, revealing the ancient parchment beneath. The writing was faded but legible, as if the words had been etched into the very fabric of time. At the center of the scroll, a single sentence was written in elegant, flowing script. The path you seek is not the one you walk, but the one you choose to remember. The adventurer's breath caught in their throat as the weight of the words sank in. The scroll wasn't just a map to the cave or the past. It was a key to understanding something far more profound. The whispering voices, the visions, the memories, it was all leading to this moment, where they were faced with a choice that could rewrite everything. Suddenly, the cave fell silent. The whispers faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the cave itself, a soft reverberation beneath their feet. The air seemed to grow still, thick with the pressure of possibility. The adventurers stood alone, the scroll in their hands, the weight of time pressing upon them. What did it all mean? The cave had shown them pieces of their own story, pieces they had buried or forgotten. But the true question lay before them. Could they accept these fragments? Could they allow these forgotten selves to become part of their present? With trembling hands, they traced the words on the scroll, feeling the deep truth that lay beneath them. The path was not fixed. It was not something that had already been determined by the steps they had taken. No, the path they sought was one of memory, of choice, of understanding. They were the ones who could decide which pieces of their past to bring forward into the present, and which to leave behind. The adventurer looked up, and for the first time, the cave seemed to shift. The walls shimmered, the stone glowing faintly with the light of distant stars. The whispers had ceased, but the air was filled with a different kind of sound, the sound of possibility, the sound of a new beginning. As they turned to leave, the adventurer knew that they were no longer the same. The cave had given them a gift, not of answers, but of the freedom to choose, to remember, to create a new path forward, not based on the past, but on a power to shape their own destiny. The cavern closed behind them as they emerged into the light. The air outside felt different, fresh, vibrant, alive. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, the adventurer understood that it was theirs to shape. The cave had whispered, and now they would listen to the call of their own heart. And as the sun set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, the adventurers stepped forward, ready to write the next chapter of their life. The adventurers stepped out into the open air, their breath coming in shallow gasps. The world seemed brighter now, more vivid, as if the very earth itself had changed with the knowledge they carried from the cave. The sky, once overcast and brooding, now shone with the golden hues of the setting sun. The wind whispered through the trees, but was no longer the murmur of distant voices. It was a breeze, a simple breath of nature, untangled from the cave's haunting echoes. Yet, despite the clarity in their heart, doubt lingered. The memories they had uncovered, the fragments of lives they hadn't lived, seemed too vast, too heavy. Could they truly embrace this new understanding of themselves? Could they integrate the life they had forgotten with the one they had always known? The scroll's words echoed in their mind, but now they carried a new weight. The path you seek is not the one you walk, but the one you choose to remember. The adventurer walked through the forest surrounding the cave, the path familiar yet unfamiliar. The trees, the stones, even there, they felt like pieces of a puzzle they were only now beginning to assemble. The journey ahead was unclear, but for the first time, they felt capable of navigating it. They could see now how each choice, no matter how small, had shaped the contours of their life. But the weight of the scroll, still tucked into their satchel, remained a constant reminder that there was more to uncover. The adventurer had only begun to understand the depth of their journey. The cave had given them a glimpse, a doorway into the forgotten, but it had also shown them something else. The world was full of these moments, these turning points, these choices waiting to be made. The adventurer's path would never be the same again. It wasn't just about finding the right way forward. It was about embracing all the possibilities, the desires, the fears that had been locked away. The memories from the cave were not just the echoes of their past. They were the fragments of who they could become. The faces and places they had seen in the vision were not strangers. They were aspects of themselves waiting to be reclaimed. As they walked, the adventurer thought about the people they had met along the way. Travelers, the wanderers, the lost souls. They, too, carried pieces of forgotten truths. Perhaps, the adventurer thought, the cave wasn't just a place to uncover one's own memories. Perhaps it was a place where all who entered could learn how to guide others through their own forgotten paths. With this new understanding, the adventurer felt a renewed sense of purpose. The cave had not just been an end, it had been a beginning. The journey now was one of reconciliation, of remembering the threads that had unraveled in the past and weaving them together into something new. But even more, it was about sharing this understanding with others, helping them find their own forgotten truths. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection and moments of quiet discovery. The adventurer visited old friends, revisited places from their past, and encountered strangers whose stories mirrored their own. Everywhere they went, they saw pieces of themselves in others, strangers with the same quiet longing, the same hidden fears, the same unresolved choices. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, the adventurer came to a realization. The journey had not been about finding answers, it had been about asking the right questions. The cave had shown them that the past was not fixed, and neither was the future. Everything was fluid, changing, shaped by the decisions we made. And those decisions, those memories, were ours to reclaim. The adventurer returned to the cave many times over the following months, not to search for answers, but to listen. To listen to the murmurs of the stones, the echoes of the past, and the quiet whispers of what lay ahead. Each time, they uncovered something new, something small, a forgotten detail that shed light on a choice, a path, a memory they hadn't fully understood before. On one such visit, they found a scroll again. But this time, when they unrolled it, the words had changed. The ink shimmered with a soft, golden glow, and new letters appeared beneath the old. The path you seek is not the one you walk, but the one you create in every step. The adventurer smiled softly, feeling the weight of those words settle deep within. The cave had revealed its final secret, not just the past, but the power to shape the present. They had found what they were seeking, not in the caverns or in the scrolls, but in the simple act of walking forward. And with that understanding, the adventurer turned once more toward the light, stepping into the unknown, not with uncertainty, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned how to find their way one step at a time. Years passed, and the adventurer's life unfolded in ways that felt both destined and of their own making. The memories they had uncovered in the cave became not just echoes of the past, but threads woven into the fabric of their everyday existence. Each decision they made felt more intentional now, more aware of the weight of its impact on the future. The people they met, the places they visited, and even the smallest moments took on new significance. The world had always been vast, but now it seemed infinite, full of possibilities that stretched far beyond what they could see. The memories from the cave weren't just pieces of history. They were guiding lights, illuminating paths in the present that had once seemed hidden. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the world bathed in the soft glow of twilight, the adventurer stood by the edge of a cliff, gazing out at the vast expanse of the valley below. The same valley that had once felt so distant, so unknown. Now it felt like home, like the place where everything had started, and yet, at the same time, where everything was still waiting to begin. It was in this quiet moment that the adventurer felt a deep sense of peace. The cave, the scroll, the whispers, it had all led them here, to this place of quiet reflection. But there was something else now, a new understanding that had grown over time. The journey had never truly been about the destination or the answers they had sought. It had been about becoming who they were meant to be, embracing the fullness of their own story, both the moments of joy and the shadows of regret. The adventurer smiled softly, thinking of the cave once more. They had returned many times after that first visit, but each time the whispers had grown quieter, as if the cave was content with the way things had unfolded. It had given its secrets, its lessons, and in return, it had asked for nothing but understanding. Now, the adventurer understood that the cave had never been a place of final answers. It had been a mirror, reflecting not just the past, but the possibilities within it. The cave had shown them their memories, yes, but more importantly, it had shown them their power to shape those memories into something meaningful, to let go of what was no longer needed, and to carry forward what had made them whole. With this realization, the adventurer knew their next step was not just about continuing their own journey, but about sharing what they had learned with others. They began to travel again, not to uncover the secrets of the past, but to help others discover their own hidden truths. They spoke of the cave, of its whispers, of the memories that shaped their lives, and how with each choice, they had the power to redefine their own path. In every town, in every village, they encountered people who had long buried their own memories, their own stories. Some were fearful of what they might uncover. Others were eager to embrace the past. But all of them, in one way or another, sought the same thing, understanding. And with each conversation, each new person they met, the adventurer felt a deep sense of fulfillment, as though they were living the purpose they had always been meant for. Years turned into decades, and the adventurer grew older, but the fire within them never dimmed. They became a quiet legend, known in many corners of the world as the one who had found a way to the heart of the Murmuring Cave, and who would return with wisdom not just for themselves, but for all those who sought it. They had become a guide, a storyteller, a keeper of the cave's secrets. And yet, even in their later years, the adventurer never stopped seeking. They never stopped asking the questions that had first led them to the cave. The path they walked, like the memories they carried, was always shifting, always in flux. Each step they took was a continuation of the journey, not toward an end, but toward new beginnings. One quiet night, as the adventurers sat by the hearth in a small cottage they had come to love, they felt a familiar pull, a soft, distant murmur, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was the voice of the cave, calling them once more. With a smile, the adventurer rose and donned their cloak. The journey was far from over. The cave, with all its mysteries, had given them everything they needed, and yet it continued to offer more. The echoes of the past, the whispers of the present, and the possibilities of the future. These were not separate things, but part of the same song, a melody that played on, forever changing, forever unfolding. And so the adventurers stepped out into the night, knowing that their next destination, like all the ones before, was not a place, but a story still waiting to be told.